You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja.
We love the herb.
It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, June 27th, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us today. We got a jam-packed show with a very special radical rant for you today. Yesterday, I ranted a little bit off the cuff, top of my head, about Bill Clinton's recent remarks to the U.S. Conference of Mayors regarding what he called a despicable epidemic of opiate overdoses. Well, today, I've had a few hours of prep time, and I got the audio from that. So we're going to rant in detail about Bill Clinton and the 6 ways that he helped usher in the modern opiate overdose epidemic. That's coming up in an extended radical rant at the end of the show today. Also on the show today, it's time for A Sensible Future, our feature on Students for Sensible Drug Policy. Kat Murti, a longtime SSDPer, talks to us about her activism after graduating college and still working with SSDP. And we learn the normal chapter that she came from that also boded well for her success in drug reform. And in our activist agenda, we go to where it's chilly. That's right, the dead of winter in Johannesburg, South Africa. We're speaking with the Dacha couple, Myrtle, Clarke, and Jules Stobbs, about their trial that could end cannabis prohibition for adults in South Africa. That's all coming up on the Marijuana Agenda. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Putting together the most comprehensive live weekday marijuana news talk program is a full-time job. Now you can do your part to ensure that listener-supported independent cannabis radio journalism can continue by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. For your $4.20 monthly donation, you'll receive over 20 hours of original first-hour podcasts, plus other materials only available to paid subscribers. Or for just $9.99 a month, become a VIP patron. You'll get over 40 hours of podcasts for the complete program, including Toker Talk Radio, plus ad-free downloads of the segments heard on the Marijuana Agenda. Plus, VIPs get exclusive access to the video replay of the 2-hour live stream show and downloads of the spreadsheets and charts I provide from my years of curating marijuana data sets. Thank you for your support, and remember, I cannot do it without you. Please become a patron today at mjagenda.com.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor-intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com, City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at marijuanamoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, June 27th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. WLWT-TV in Ohio brings us this story about officials in Middletown proposing to let opiate overdose victims die if it's their third time calling 911 for assistance. Quote, "We are faced with stress on our services, particularly the EMS services, where we can do 6 to 8 opioid overdose runs a day," end quote, said Paul Lawley, the fire chief of Middletown. The number of overdoses jumped this year. Last year, there were 532 overdoses. So far, only halfway through 2017, there are already 577. Also last year, the department spent more than $11,000 on naloxone, branded as Narcan, the medicine given to first responders that immediately revives an opiate overdose victim. This year, $30,000 has been spent on it. City Council member Dan Picard is proposing a 3-strike system where victims do community service to pay for EMT response and the Narcan. Quote, "If the dispatcher determines that the person who's overdosed is someone who's been a part of the program for 2 previous overdoses and has not completed the community service and has not cooperated in the program, then we wouldn't dispatch," end quote, said Picard. The fire department said they are required by law to provide Narcan if they do respond to an overdose. Advocates for medical marijuana have filed the necessary paperwork to get the issue before voters in 2018, Fox 13 in Salt Lake City, Utah reports. The ballot initiative is modeled after legislation that failed to get out of the Utah State Legislature, sponsored by then-Senator Mark Madsen from Saratoga Springs. Notably, the initiative forbids smoking or vaping of marijuana and bans patients from growing their own cannabis. Qualifying illnesses include HIV, AIDS, Alzheimer's, ALS, cancer, Crohn's disease, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, PTSD, autism, and rare and chronic diseases. However, there will be a limited number of physicians who can recommend medical cannabis. Shortly after the announcement, Utah activists on Twitter noted that the Utah legislature's Wi-Fi was blocking access to the campaign website for the medical marijuana initiative. On Twitter, Marijuana Majority founder Tom Angel replied, quote, "I'm sure it's automated based on keywords, but still highly symbolic of Utah lawmakers' willingness to ignore medical marijuana for so long," end quote. In news that breaks nobody's heart here at the Marijuana Agenda, Washington state officials announced that if a budget deal is not brokered soon, they will have to shut down the state's marijuana eradication program. Quote, "The Washington state legislature has not yet approved state operating and capital budgets for the 2017 through 19 biennium, which begins July 1st, reads the announcement. If the legislature does not enact budgets by June 30th, state agencies will have to implement full or partial shutdowns," end quote. Other shutdowns that could affect the prosecution of home cultivation and other marijuana crimes still on the books in Washington include drug analysis, toxicology analysis, and impaired driving investigations, as well as statewide narcotics investigative support and participation in statewide regional narcotics task forces at the law enforcement level. LA Weekly is reporting that a new proposal in California, Senate Bill 162 by State Senator Ben Allen of Santa Monica, would, quote, "prohibit medical cannabis and non-medical marijuana licensees from advertising or using branded merchandise," end quote, according to the bill. Quote, "A licensee shall not advertise medical cannabis or medical cannabis products through the use of branded merchandise, including but not limited to clothing, hats, or other merchandise with the name or logo of the product," end quote. The legislation, it makes clear it would not apply to nonprofit or non-commercial speech, is part of a wave of bills intended to smooth out any rough edges included in Proposition 64, the November initiative that legalizes recreational weed in the Golden State. But the proposal would also apply to medical marijuana. With 165,000 to 230,000 full and part-time workers, the U.S. cannabis industry has quickly become a major job generator, says Marijuana Business Daily. Cannabis-related businesses now employ more people than there are dental hygienists and bakers in the United States. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, June 27th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net. I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Police for Reform with Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is A Sensible Future, brought to you by Students for Sensible Drug Policy at SSDP.org. Drug policy is an issue that primarily affects the young, both in terms of use and legal prosecution. SSDP believes in honest education about drugs and advocates for harm reduction policies to protect young adults and society at large. We speak with another dedicated activist from SSDP, working toward a sensible future.
Welcome to this episode of A Sensible Future, the podcast for Students for Sensible Drug Policy. I'm Russ Belville, and joining us here for the podcast today, we have Kat Murti. She's a board member and longtime SSDPer. How you doing, Kat?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Russ.
Oh, so glad to have you. So when did you get started with SSDP?
So I actually got started in January of 2009. And I got started because, I kept hearing about SSDP on my campus. I went to UC Berkeley, and I thought, hey, why not? Let me get involved with these people who are working to end the drug war.
That's excellent. So attending UC Berkeley, was it just your freshman year that you'd heard about them?
So this is actually my last year of school. I heard about them in 2008, towards the end of 2008, so in January of 2009. Oh, I guess it wasn't my last year. It was my next last year. So 3 semesters to go, I decided to get involved. And I got to tell you, I've been super involved ever since then. So it's clearly a good decision.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you were just finishing up school and just getting involved with SSDP and now you're still involved, it shows to people listening out there, this isn't just about college students, correct?
Right, definitely. I mean, we are a student organization, and we're very grassroots, so our chapters really do have a lot to do with what goes on with the organization. But we have college campuses. We even have a couple high school chapters now. And, we have this massive network of SSDP alumni and folks who got involved even a little bit later after school.
I am well aware. I have many people that I talk to through the podcasts that I produce that have graduated from SSDP and moved into consulting or other nonprofit organization work. And I think SSDP presents a perfect launching pad for people that are getting involved in these kind of reform efforts. Now, Kat, as far as you getting involved, you said you'd heard about SSDP. Was there anything that compelled you to get involved? I mean, sometimes some people get busted or they get sick, and that compels them to get involved. What was your motivating factor?
Well, I can tell you on my side of things, I was really looking for an organization that was working to end the war on drugs, something that I was personally quite passionate about. The criminal justice system is just a wreck. And when I was in school, not even college. Before that, I saw a number of people going through the school-to-prison pipeline. Once you get into the system, it just drags you back in and back in and back in. And I was lucky that I was able to escape that. But I saw it happen to so many people. And what I kept seeing as one of the factors that came up again and again was a lot of times folks were getting busted with, half of a joint or something like that. And that would be the first time that they would get pulled into the system. So it was definitely a huge problem that I saw. And it was something that I wanted to address. I wanted to work to end the drug war. And, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. And when I was there, I joined the DFW Normal chapter, but when I looked around on campus at Cal, I didn't see anything similar. So when I started hearing about SSDP, I knew that was the group that I should join, and I'm glad I did. Part because they really do address, all drugs, but also just the larger criminal justice problems and justice in general.
I'm glad to hear that you're also from Texas and had worked with the DFW Normal chapter. That's one of the finest normal chapters in the country. And to go from Texas to Berkeley, California had to be quite a culture shock, I imagine.
Well, actually, I went because of the culture. I was looking at a few different schools, and I visited Berkeley with a friend of mine. And when I got there, I just fell in love. I was a pretty politically active kid growing up. It was, I'm a libertarian. I've been a libertarian since I was a young teenager, and I've always been quite active politically. And so Berkeley, I heard all these stories, and then when I went to campus and I saw what the culture was like there and how involved and how much people cared about it, I knew that was the place I wanted to be.
Well, that's great. It sounds like then you got involved with SSDP from a very political, ideological standpoint. So you get through college at Berkeley. How did you stay connected to SSDP after graduation? What was your next role?
Yeah, definitely. So in college, I joined the chapter, and then soon after I became the chapter president, and I started interning at the SSDP office. So, that definitely made me a big part of the network, and going to conferences and going to events and working with other chapters kind of built up that friend group for me. So that certainly helped a lot. And then when I left college, it was something that opened the door for me on my resume, having that there and talking to jobs about that. And it was also just this network. I moved across the country to D.C., so I knew SSDPers already, so those were the only folks that I knew in town. And then, we had a lot of opportunities to keep working. I was trying to get involved, setting up something to help folks like me who were SSDP grads and were looking for jobs. So we set up kind of like an unofficial SSDP network around that. I got involved with what is now our DARE committee, and don't worry, that is a joke. It's the Diversity, Awareness, Reflection, and Education Committee.
Much better DARE, if you ask me. Much better.
Right. It's a DARE about actual issues, not just made-up government propaganda. So it's just one thing after another. So I've been chairing that committee for about 5 years now. We've done a lot of work to try to make SSDP and the drug policy reform movement more open and accepting. And in the meantime, I petitioned to join the board. I applied to join the board on the basis of, all of this great work that we were doing with DARE. I wanted to be on the other side of that and really bring a lot of that to the board as well. And then a couple years ago when we formed the Board of Trustees, I decided to be one of the founding members of the Board of Trustees as well. So now I actually sit on the board, and I'm vice chair of the Board of Trustees.
Wow, great job. You've just risen through the ranks of SSDP. And for someone out there who's listening to the podcast, who's wanting to get involved with SSDP, how do they follow your example? I mean, can they start their own chapter if one doesn't exist at their college?
Yeah, actually, it's super easy. You just reach out, just Google us, or look at ssdp.org. We have something called the Campus Ambassadors Program. So even if we just have one student on a campus who really wants to get involved, we start you off as an ambassador, and then we have these awesome outreach directors who will really help you figure out what you need to do on your campus to get folks started. So then we'll slowly help you scale up to the point where there is a chapter, including helping you reach out to other folks who might be in your area at different campuses on chapters, or if we know that, like, hey, actually there's 3 people from your school who've all reached out to us wanting to start a chapter, let us introduce you. Here's here's how we can help you move forward with this, you know?
That's great. It's a great organization for people to get involved with. I recommend checking out ssdp.org for more information. And where are you taking this? How long do you think you'll keep going with SSDP, and what's next for you?
Oh, well, it's hard to tell, you know, because I love SSDP. I don't see certainly my relationship to SSDP ending at any time. I love the work we do. We have this great alumni network. So I think as far as that goes, you know, you could see me still involved for a very long time. As far as being on the board goes, you know, I've got, you know, my term's still going on. I feel like I have a lot more work to do, and we'll see where that goes. But as far as I can see, as long as there is a drug war out there, as long as people are being thrown in cages for nonviolent acts, yeah, I think this is work that I think is vital, and I will continue doing.
Well, we're glad that you're doing it, Kat Murti. If people want to get in touch with you, do you have an email address or Facebook, anything you'd like to let them know about?
Sure. Actually, the best way to get in touch with me is on Twitter. I'm at Kat Murti, K-A-T, last name M-U-R-T-I.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us here on A Sensible Future.
Great. Thank you so much, Russ.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for Cannabis Facts About Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda. Like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Putting together the most comprehensive live weekday marijuana news talk program is a full-time job. Now you can do your part to ensure that listener-supported independent cannabis radio journalism can continue by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. If you're an organization or business looking to promote your brand, we have sponsorship patronage available at mjagenda.com. Sponsorship includes 15 and 30-second ad breaks and 6-minute interviews on the podcast, depending on sponsorship level, which begins at $19.99 a month. Thank you for your support, and remember, I cannot do it without you. Please become a patron today at mjagenda.com.
activism begins with ACT. The Marijuana Agenda features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome to our activist agenda. For today's activist agenda, we go all the way to the opposite side of the planet in the dead of winter into Johannesburg, South Africa, where we're visiting with Jules Stobbs and Myrtle Clarke, also known as the Daka couple. Welcome back to the show, Myrtle and Jules.
Hello.
Thank you very much, Russ. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. When we last spoke, you were working on your case, taking on the laws in South Africa that prohibit the use of Daka, which is the local term for cannabis or marijuana. Give our listeners an update on what's happening with your case.
It's full power here, Russell. It's 33 days until the trial, and we've been at this for a few years now, so it's gathering steam, and it's very, very complex. But we've got this amazing legal team that have stepped up to the plate fully now, and they're bullying the state, who are, of course, the defendants, and they are getting their ducks in a row. And we found out who our judge is today, and everybody's abiding by the rules of that judge, and it's game on, and the trial will take place. Nobody's trying to get out of this anymore. So it's gonna be quite a battle for 19 days in the Pretoria High Court. I think it's something like 4 weeks on Monday.
And we had also last, when we took a look at South Africa, we had talked about a ruling that had occurred regarding the right to homegrown cannabis. Has that been clarified at all?
No, not really. We are going to be, it's in a different province to us. So each province's high courts are separate. So we, as in our personal capacity and as our nonprofit company, we are going to intervene in that case because the state is taking it on appeal, straight to the Constitutional Court on appeal. So that's what's happening now. But what the impact for us is that we're stuck in this gray area at the moment. So we're waiting for one of our various court cases of people who've been arrested to come up where they can actually use that judgment in court in order to have all charges dropped. So as soon as that happens, then we know that we're on the right foot with the private use judgment.
So it sounds... I was going to say it sounds somewhat akin to here in the States where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled on our Rohrabacher Amendment where you can't punish medical marijuana states, but the Ninth Circuit is just these Western states. We're not sure if that really applies in the other states.
Right. Exactly.
So you need a case that will take it higher and give it a precedent that covers the whole country.
Well, you know what happened with that judgment was it was a judgment on privacy issues, not on cannabis issues. It was actually the right to privacy in your own home. Yeah. So nothing was thrashed out about the pros and cons of cannabis in society. So that's where we figure we come in with what we've dubbed as the trial of the plant. We are the plaintiffs, the government are the defendants, and basically we have asked them to justify their punitive laws, their broad-ranging punitive laws of putting people in jail for smoking a benign weed. Now, you come up with a reason why you'd want to do that and continue to do it for the last 100 years. And we've a funny feeling they haven't got a leg to stand on, and this is a slam dunk. But we're taking it very, very seriously, and so is the legal team, because as we've seen with the Western Cape High Court judgment, it's down to a magistrate now. In our local magistrates' court, there are various magistrates in 3 or 4 different rooms, and one of them threw out 5 cannabis possession charges 2 weeks ago, struck them off the board, doesn't want to hear about them anymore. But then another guy in the next room with another magistrate was given 70 hours community service for 3.7 grams. So that's serious human nature, and nobody really cares too much about the law at that point. They've already been hung, drawn, and quartered by the time they walk into that particular magistrate's room. So human nature is playing a huge role in it. It's going to take another couple of years for it to be ratified and turned into law, but we're going to bring out the heavy artillery now and thrash this out once and for all. Does it make you drive like an idiot? Does it make you psycho, schizophrenic, etc., et al.? And we're going to make sure that we have enough evidence orally at that trial to prove once and for all this is at least far less hectic than having alcohol legal in society. That's what we want out of this.
Yes, it sounds as if then the case, the privacy case, is a little more akin to what we had in Alaska in 1975, where their constitution guaranteed personal privacy to the point where the state couldn't make the case that your weed smoking or growing outweighed your privacy. Is that kind of similar?
Yeah. That's kind of that's very similar. And as we know, Alaska grappled with that for years and years, and we expect to as well at this part of the world, because it's been judged in such a way and it's been written in such a way that it all has to be tested in court. And who wins then? All the lawyers and all the magistrates and all the judges, and the courts become full of people holding up this 66-page document saying it's unconstitutional to arrest me for smoking in my home. The judge said so. And the magistrate will go, fair enough. But you will still be arrested, and the cops have doubled down, Russ. The cops are going ballistic out there at the moment. There's loads of petty arrests. There's loads of people spending weekends in jail, and nothing sticks in court because of this judgment. And as soon as the cops realize nothing's going to stick in court and they don't get a conviction, then maybe they'll just leave us all alone. But they've been booting down doors for a century. They're not going to stop anytime soon, you know.
So is this an increase based on a new administration, a new directive, or just
a brand new directive? Yeah, and a directive that reiterated that the law is the law until the law is changed, and they don't care what the judge says until the law is the law.
Oh, my goodness. All right. So we've got 33 days until your trial is coming up. Your case is coming up. I understand that you're getting together experts to testify. Do you have some of these lined up? Can you tell us some of the people that would be appearing?
Yes, we have all our experts are confirmed. Their flights are booked, their accommodations booked, their safaris are booked.
And they don't fly coach.
I got to start putting that into my rider.
True story. So we have headlining, we have Donald Abrahams.
Oh, he's great.
From San Francisco. And then we have Professor David Nutt from Imperial College in London. And then those are two international experts. And then we have our local experts, which include a historian, a criminologist, who was the author of the report that won the case in the Western Cape High Court. He was one of the authors. That's a long story, but his name is Dr. Simon Howell. And we have an economics expert who wrote his doctorate on the cannabis and the economy in South Africa. And then we have somebody from the not so aptly named Anti-Drug Alliance, who is actually an expert on how much this costs the economy. So he's written 2 reports quite recently, and he will be able to tell the court, listen, this is how much it's costing you, and this is actually what you're getting out of it. This is the total amount of drugs seized, you know. So that's going to be interesting for them to hear. So we're going with all of these experts. We're really, the bottom line is Professor David Nutt on the scale of harms. He's our kind of star witness. Donald Abrahams will say from the medical perspective and the all the research that he's done, he will say that it doesn't harm you. And then Professor Nutt will say it doesn't harm you as much as alcohol and tobacco, because we need to put the ground down for the regulations later. You can't enforce the law more strictly than alcohol.
Like Canada. Geez, dude, we just came back from Montreal. We went to the harm reduction conference there and met some really cool Canadian activists there. We were shown a real good time. We were shown the ins and outs of many things, but Trudeau's new rules that he wants to put in force for keeping it away from the children, it's a bit bizarre. It's mad. It's 500 Canadian dollars if you sell liquor to a minor, and it's 14 years if you sell weed to a minor. There's no rationale at all. And as you probably know, his top dog's an ex-cop. The drug czar's an ex-police chief, for Christ's sake. So that's the way they are going, and we're damned if it's going to do that here. You cannot regulate cannabis stricter than alcohol in this country or any other country, and that's why we're doing the trial of the plant. And between me and you and Myrtle, we'll be glad when it's over, actually. It's about 50 days. We're going to be free from it, and we're going to take the aforementioned Ford pickup truck and head off into the desert for a little while with the phone system.
It's well-deserved. Well-deserved time off. I'm wondering also, in the cultural landscape, in the political landscape in South Africa, if there is a similar issue as what we're seeing here in the States with regard to opiate overdoses. I know that's starting to weigh here in, our side saying medical marijuana can lead away from that, and their side saying marijuana is a gateway to it. Is there the same thing at play with opiates in South Africa?
I don't think that there's been such a wave of opiates down here. Certainly an incredible scourge, as they love to call it, of methamphetamine. They call it tick here. So that is our main thing, together with heroin and buttons, as it's called. It's mandrax. There's still some of that around, and
benzos, basically. Smoking benzos. Can you believe it?
It's a particularly South African thing.
Yeah.
As far as the gateway drug is concerned, yes, it certainly is going to come up. It certainly is going to come up in court. And my topic for my speech at harm reduction in Montreal was cannabis policy as a gateway to more saner drug policy in general. So we're hoping, because we've learned from all of these countries and policies and whatnot around the world, we're hoping that cannabis can lead the way, because there certainly is. We've had lots of contact with activists in the broader drug spectrum. And there's actually a drug policy week happening during the first week of our court case. And there's a crossover between our experts and people that are speaking there. We're borrowing Ethan Nadelman from them.
Woohoo! Getting the big guns.
To come and speak at our convention. So yes, it is. We are definitely expanding into the broader thing. But the opioids, I think that they're most probably on their way.
Yeah, I think generally there are more and more articles about it.
Yeah.
When I was in Montreal, I didn't realize until Montreal the depth and breadth of the problem in Canada. It mortified me that people are chopping up good street drugs with opioids to mess them up. How do you say it? Fentanyl.
Fentanyl, you got it.
Fentanyl, I had heard of it, but on the periphery, but now I understand fully what that insidious thing is. And it's getting chopped into everything, and people are going down. It's horrific. It's not here yet, I don't think. There's enough problems with dirty drugs on poverty-stricken streets in the low poverty, the poverty areas and the ghettos of South Africa. It's the same anywhere in the world,
Sure. Well, Jules Stobbs, Myrtle Clarke, the Dacha couple. We don't get a lot of information on what's happening in Africa. So for our listeners out there that might want to know more about your case or to help you out in any way, do you have any websites or connections you can tell them about?
Yes, we do. We've got 3 busy websites. If you search Dacha Couple, that's DAGGA Couple, or Fields of Green for All. That is our .org.za. That's our nonprofit company, and we've got we're all over Facebook and Instagram, YouTube.
Yeah, we're there. We've got quite a community going. I think we're the premier online sort of Facebook kind of social media portal in the country now. Not bad for old people, eh?
Not bad at all. Well, Myrtle and Jules, thank you so much for joining us here on the Activist Agenda, and we'll follow up in 34 days to find out what happened in your trial.
We've got a hashtag going. It'll be TOTP, Trial at the Plant, and we have a social media group within that court. We're going to stream it live. Hopefully, we're still waiting for the full permission, but we're going to stream it over the Fields of Green website, and so people around the world can see the definitive argument of the pros and cons of legalizing cannabis. Have a nice day.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJagenda.com.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
This November, whether you see the words medical marijuana on your ballot or not, the issue is there. From the halls of Congress to your state capitol or city hall, politicians are already making decisions on medical marijuana policy on your behalf. This election, make sure they are representing you. Every vote is a vote for medical marijuana.
Visit votemedicalmarijuana.org today.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Just say no.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am ill. That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
People don't smoke marijuana.
Former U.S. President Bill Clinton spoke at the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Miami on Sunday about the growing opioid overdose epidemic, as reported by the Daily Caller. Well, who helped make all that possible, Mr. President?
Our kids were delivered, and a lot of our adults were delivered into a paralyzing addiction by doctors, pharmacists, and drug manufacturers, not by armed gangs.
Well, I've got 6 different ways that Bill Clinton helped to bring about this opioid epidemic, and the first reason is that Bill Clinton's FDA opened the floodgates to Big Pharma's pill pushing. In 1983, Big Pharma aired its first direct-to-consumer television advertisement for a prescription drug. It's difficult these days for Americans to understand how incredibly unethical it is to have such advertisements. The United States and New Zealand are the only countries that allow drug cartels, I mean Big Pharma, to push their drugs directly to the user. To the patient. By 1985, the FDA had set stringent rules regarding the Big Pharma ads. Primarily, they couldn't express that a specific drug could treat a specific claim. This mostly kept Big Pharma's TV drug pushers at bay. That all changed in 1996 in Bill Clinton's first term. That's when Big Pharma figured out the ask your doctor loophole. They made an ad for Claritin, a cheery spot that never actually explained what Claritin was or what it was for, thus obeying the FDA's advertising mandates. Instead, the ad implored the user to ask your doctor if Claritin is right for you. Experts claim the Claritin ad for opening the floodgates for Big Pharma's TV ads. In 1997, at the start of Bill Clinton's second term, the FDA relaxed its rules to allow TV ads to refer to print ads for detailed information, to offer 800 numbers and websites, and to make the kind of specific drug for specific ailment claims that fill every other ad slot on the evening news these days. In 1993, Bill Clinton's first term, Big Pharma was spending $360 million a year on its advertising. By 1998, just 5 years later, it was up to $1.3 billion in spending. In 2006, it reached $5 billion. And last year, it was still around $5.2 billion, with 1/4 of that spent on advertising just 5 drugs. Humira for arthritis, Lyrica for nerve pain, Eliquis for stroke, Cialis for erections, and Xeljanz for arthritis. Number 2, Bill Clinton's FDA does nothing as OxyContin sales jump from $45 million to over $1 billion a year.
We should all acknowledge that we should have seen more of this before. But what we have to acknowledge now is we have a chance to deal with this in a comprehensive way, and we're not close.
What is it that the President of the United States in the 1990s could have seen more of? Well, that story starts in 1995, again in Clinton's first term, when Purdue Pharmaceuticals came up with a new drug, an opioid painkiller they called OxyContin. The FDA, under Clinton's administration, approved it for sale in 1996, and the company made $45 million selling OxyContin. From 1996 to 2000, Purdue doubles its sales force, dedicated to selling OxyContin, which they claimed had a, quote, less than 1%, end quote, chance of causing dependence. By 2000, Purdue is selling $1.1 billion in OxyContin, and its sales reps are getting average bonuses of $70,000 a year, with some bonuses as high as $250,000 for reps who push the most pills. Now, to be fair, it's not as if Presidents Bush and Obama put a stop to the flood of Oxy. In 2007, a subsidiary of Purdue and 3 of its executives pleaded guilty to misbranding OxyContin as, quote, less addictive and less subject to abuse and diversion than other opioids, end quote. Nobody went to prison, of course. The company just had to pay a $634 million fine. By 2010, Purdue is selling $3.1 billion worth of OxyContin, accounting for 30% of the entire U.S. painkiller market. By 2015, the Sackler family, owners of Purdue Pharmaceuticals, finally make it into the Forbes list of top 20 richest families at $14 billion. Purdue also made sure to keep tabs on its dealers. Doctors. By composing databases to track who was selling the most pills. The Los Angeles Times reported that the company had been tracking doctors since 2002 and knew about 150 of them were recklessly overprescribing OxyContin, one of whom was making $1.5 million a year just prescribing those pills to the addicted. Number 3, Bill Clinton's DEA opened the floodgates to OxyContin manufacturing.
As the government got better at dealing with opioids, more people moved into heroin.
Now, better at dealing with opioids would be better expressed as finally pumped the brakes on opioid manufacturing. See, OxyContin is a Schedule II drug. That means that its production is strictly monitored by the Drug Enforcement Administration, particularly within a bureau called the Office of Diversion Control. That office is in charge of setting the production quotas that pharmaceutical companies are allowed for Schedule II drugs. In 1997, the first year after OxyContin was released, the DEA approved a quota of 8.3 tons. By 2011, the quota had risen to 105 tons, an increase of over 1,200%. And again, that's not all on Bill Clinton's DEA. George W. Bush's DEA and Barack Obama's DEA were also approving these quota increases. The maddening part is why the DEA approved these increases. As former Office of Diversion Control head Gene Hayslip told Salon, quote, the way I did it for 17 years, which was basically the way it had always been done, even before the DEA was the DEA, is that when a significant diversion problem occurred, the quota increase requests would come under greater scrutiny. With Oxy, there has been a significant diversion problem since the late 1990s, so the requests should have come under greater scrutiny, end quote. But they didn't. The reason why, according to DEA, was because they had to allow Big Pharma to make enough OxyContin for illegal drug abusers so legal pain patients wouldn't go without. No, seriously. In that 2011 interview with Salon, DEA Supervisory Special Agent Gary Boggs explained that DEA is required by statute to set quotas, so there is, quote, an uninterrupted supply for the legitimate medical and scientific research needs of the United States, end quote. Boggs then explained that illegal users threaten to interrupt that supply, telling Salon, quote, what you have to understand is that you do have legitimate patients, and they're fishing from the same pond that the illegitimate patients are fishing from, so you have to be cautious not to restrict the quota to the point that when the legitimate parties go to the pool, all the fish haven't been taken out by the illegitimate parties, end quote. Well, it's funny how that reasoning doesn't work for medical marijuana. Try explaining to the DEA that, like Eddie Lepp, you needed to grow those 29,000 cannabis plants so that when the recreational marijuana smokers have fished from the same pond, there's still enough marijuana left for the legitimate medical marijuana patients. With every other drug but OxyContin, the DEA seemed to believe that cutting off the supply of that drug will reduce the abuse of it. Number 4, Bill Clinton's NAFTA opened up the floodgates to the Mexican drug cartels.
Heroin is cheaper now because it is now being grown in Mexico in the hidden parts of the Sierra Madre Mountains and being harvested by preteens.
In his book, Compromised, Clinton, Bush, and the CIA, former CIA asset Terry Reid tells his story of then governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, who in 1983 allowed CIA operatives to use the rural airstrip in Mena, Arkansas, to allow the CIA to bring in massive quantities of cocaine from Central America. In exchange, Reid alleges, the CIA would back the then unknown governor in a bid for the presidency. That cocaine would go on to be sold through the CIA on the streets of South Central Los Angeles with the help of Freeway Ricky Ross, as told by the late Gary Webb in his stunning investigative journalism, leading to the 1980s crack cocaine epidemic. The proceeds of those sales then illegally funded the Nicaraguan Contra rebels fighting on behalf of the CIA in an insurgency against the communist government. Clinton wins that election for president in 1992. By 1994, Clinton has successfully pushed Congress to pass the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA. That trilateral agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico opens up the borders to increase trade. By 2013, about 350,000 loaded truck containers, 442,000 loaded rail containers, over 1.2 billion personal vehicle passengers, and more than 41 million pedestrians crossed the U.S.-Mexican border, according to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. That suddenly made the Mexican land routes far more attractive to drug traffickers than air and sea transport. NAFTA, quote, has certainly attributed to an increasing drug traffic over the border, end quote, says a 2015 report from the Council on Hemispheric Relations. That NAFTA would increase drug trafficking was no mystery either. In his book, Border Games, Policing the U.S.-Mexico Divide, author Peter Andreas explained that, quote, pushing NAFTA through Congress required deflecting concerns that opening the border to legal trade might unintentionally open it to illegal drugs, end quote. Indeed, in the early 1990s, the U.S. crime rate was at an all-time high, and the crack epidemic had reached its apex. Had Congress been fully aware that NAFTA was guaranteed to increase drug trafficking, it's likely it never would have passed. Bill Clinton's administration purposefully kept quiet about knowing NAFTA's dark Mexican drug secret. Number 5, Bill Clinton's crime bill created the perfect street dealer labor force.
So now it is becoming attractive to urban gangs. It's going to eat us all alive.
As the crime wave of the early 1990s peaked, Bill Clinton became as much of a staunch drug warrior as any Republican president who preceded him. He promised to get tough on crime and signed the 1994 Crime Bill, which mandated 3 strikes and you're out penalties and strict mandatory minimum sentences for drug trafficking. He also put 100,000 more police officers on the street, now equipped with military gear, and a directive to stamp out drug trafficking. While the Get Tough on Drugs policies had already been started in 1986, pushed primarily by then Democratic Senator Joe Biden, during the Clinton years the effects became more pronounced. Though designed to take down so-called drug kingpins, the policies actually cracked down on mid to low-level drug dealers who increasingly spent longer times in prison. More dealers in prison for longer times just opened up more drug dealing jobs for the people on the street. The revolving door from street to prison to street continued turning out people who, targeted by the label convicted drug dealer, could only find work by returning to the drug trade. Combined with NAFTA, the crime bill made it possible for the Mexican drug cartels to wage increasingly violent wars south of the border for control of the lucrative border crossing routes, and to build increasingly sophisticated gang networks north of the border to distribute the product. And number 6, Bill Clinton's drug czar fought to prevent safer alternatives to opioid painkillers.
It got even cheaper with fentanyl, which is a synthetic drug that if you have a 13-year-old child, or certainly a 15-year-old child that can make a C in high school chemistry, and access to a garage, they can learn to make.
In the 1990s, as Big Pharma is imploring TV viewers to ask your doctor about their latest pills, a revolution is taking place on the West Coast as patients begin to ask their doctor about the medical benefits of marijuana. In the 1996 election, Bill Clinton won his second term, and California passed the Compassionate Use Act, the nation's first medical marijuana law. Patients began to use cannabis for a myriad of purposes, but one of the primary uses turned out to be analgesic, as cannabis was found to be a superior pain reliever, specifically for the kind of neuropathic pain that is resistant to opioid treatments like OxyContin. Today, we have the studies showing that states with access to medical cannabis show a great reduction in the harms from opioids, including fewer deaths from, overdoses from, addictions to, use of, and prescriptions for opioids. Back in the late 1990s, these were just anecdotes from patients being relayed to doctors. But Bill Clinton's drug czar not only tried to halt the expansion of medical marijuana in California and elsewhere, referring to it as Cheech and Chong medicine, he actually tried to punish doctors if they even mentioned medical marijuana as an option for their patients. The Clinton administration convened a secret meeting of 40 government and private sector drug warriors to strategize how to prevent medical marijuana initiatives from passing in other states, leading to a push for anti-drug messaging from the government, inserted surreptitiously into television shows and magazine articles. It took a lawsuit against the federal government to recognize the free speech rights of doctors to talk about, not prescribe, medical marijuana to their patients. That's why all 29 states with working medical marijuana laws allow doctors to recommend medical marijuana, not prescribe it, which is barred by federal law.
This is the first drug epidemic that ever, in the beginning, had higher addiction rates in small town and rural America than urban America. And there have been some very pointed observations lately, which I don't disagree with, that maybe we're seeing this finally as a public health problem it is, instead of something to be handled solely through the criminal justice system, because it hit more white people than African Americans and Latinos. I don't disagree with that.
It's great that Bill Clinton is calling for smarter ways of dealing with our nation's opioid overdose epidemic, but let's not forget how much of it was created and enabled by his administration's drug and crime policies. All the time we got for today. Stay tuned for hour 2, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.